Now we move to the latest on the Staten Island chokehold death of Eric Garner and obviously the questions it is raising on many fronts, including the NYPD's broken windows policies. Now, the death of Garner has police unions, city officials, and community activists all speaking out. Reverend Al Sharpton, as you know, has been very vocal. He calling for the arrest of Officer Daniel Pantaleo. He is the one that you can see in the back on the video. He's the officer who had put Garner in that chokehold while attempting to arrest him for allegedly selling loose cigarettes. As we know, Garner died following the incident. The medical examiner ruled his death a homicide and said that the chokehold, coupled with pre-existing medical conditions, led to his death. Mayor Bill de Blasio defended the medical examiner's ruling.
That is not an acceptable tool for officers to use, again, but for the most extraordinary situations.
We should not be dealing with police breaking the law with illegal chokehold. That's the only thing here. The district attorney needs to either say I'm going to move forward and arrest or I'm going to defer to the federal government. But you cannot have the facts and not address the facts.
But there are others who didn't feel the same way, including Pat Lynch, who's head of the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, the PBA. Today, Lynch, he called the ruling, quote unquote, political, and even disputed that there was even a chokehold.
I've never seen a document that was more political than that press release released by the ME's office. It is outrageously insulting to all police officers to say that we go out on our streets to choke people of color.
Now, the Garner case, it has many questioning the NYPD's so-called broken windows. That's a policing policy that you may remember came in under Rudy Giuliani and this same police commissioner, Mr. Bratton. Now, this was created, many agree, with the best of intentions.
I very much subscribe to the broken windows theory. A theory that was developed by Professors Wilson and Kelling 25 years ago, maybe. And the idea of it is you had to pay attention to small things. Otherwise, they'd get out of control and they become much worse. And that, in fact, you know, in a lot of our approach to crime, quality of life, social programs, we were allowing small things to get worse rather than dealing with them at the earliest possible stage. We started paying attention to the things that were being ignored. Aggressive panhandling, the squeegee operators that would come up to your car and wash the window of your car whether you wanted it or not. And sometimes, you know, smash people's cars or tires or windows. Or the street-level drug dealing, the prostitution, the graffiti, all these things that were deteriorating the city. So we said, well, we're going to pay attention to that. And it worked. I mean, it worked because we not only got a big reduction in that and an improvement in the quality of life, but massive reductions in homicide. And New York City turned from the crime capital of America to the safest large city in the country for 5-6 years in a row.
So while Rudy Giuliani says the broken windows was a necessary step for the city, recent criticism of the theory comes amid a New York Daily News report, which also found that roughly 81% of the 7.3 million people hit with violations between 2001 and 2013 were Black and Hispanic. Mayor de Blasio, he though defends the form of policing and says it did help drive down crime.
You're going to see a number of adjustments as we go along. It's meant to create fairness and equality. So we've got a question of how we're going to approach quality of life crimes. We should approach them the same in every neighborhood. We've got the question of how we're going to treat each kind of crime. That's something we constantly adjust to try and figure out the right balance.
Okay, so de Blasio believes that the policy may need tweaking, but it's still a good policy. Not everybody agrees, though. Earlier today, I spoke with New York State Senator James Sanders about broken windows and whether or not he believes you can actually fix it or it's got to go. Senator, thank you very much for some time. And secondly, why don't you tell us, tell our audience here where you and the mayor aren't exactly on the same page when it comes to this policy?
My position on it, on the broken windows theory, which of course sociologist Charles Murray and others have given us, is different. I think that we're over-relying on one policy versus another. At first it was stop and frisk, which is a legitimate policing tool. which was abused, and it couldn't do everything. Now we're hoping that broken windows can do everything. Instead of realizing that crime comes from many different places, many different sources, therefore has to be attacked many different ways, we seem to be saying to a hammer, every problem is a nail, and right now the flavor of the month is broken windows, and therefore everything must be attacked in the same way. This is bad policing.
But the head of the PBA and the sergeant's PBA did a press conference today. I'm sure you've heard some of the comments that have come out of it, but they said basically cops are almost being indicted right now for doing their jobs. They're supposed to follow the laws and the books, and Pat Lynch said that officers are having a hard time doing their job because, quote, it's become fashionable to resist arrest. There's an attitude, he said, on our city streets today that it's acceptable to resist arrest. That attitude, a direct result of lack of respect for law enforcement, resulting from slanderous, insulting, and unjust manner in which police officers are being portrayed by race baiters, politicians, pundits, and even our elected officials. Does he have a point?
There's going to be a small point in all of these things, but if you're really interested in solving the problem, the rule of law has to be respected by everyone. You cannot break the law to enforce the law. If you're using a chokehold, and we're going to debate whether it was the traditional chokehold or was it some modified. We're going to split hairs, and we're going to ignore that this hold has been deemed so dangerous that it should not be used by police. There has to be one rule of law, and everyone must do it. And when you take that oath as a police officer, you're held to a higher standard. I understand this. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I walk the line too. And I understand the higher calling, the higher standard that you are held to. So I'm going to be lenient. I understand that officers want to come home also. But please understand that there is far more than just one or two officers who are being unfairly stigmatized. You have a culture in the police department. I'm not saying all police. You have a culture in the police department which must be changed. This is why I support Mayor de Blasio's call and the police commissioner's call for a complete retraining of the police department of New York City. But at the same time, it doesn't help anyone if we are going to say that anyone with eyes who can see the video and who obviously was disappointed and outraged, which should be the majority of the people in this city and indeed the world, are race baiters, police haters, or any of these other things. You're not going to, you're hurting your own point, Detective Lynch. You're hurting your own point by not admitting that there's a problem, but you have a solution that you envision.
Finally, Senator, you've heard some of the police complaints here as it relates to the messenger, more specifically Al Sharpton, given some of his past fights in the NYPD, but also from the Tawana Brawleys and the rest. They said, he's certainly given the impression that he gets, and I'm using a direct quote here from the head of the Sergeant's PBA, Sharpton gets to determine the direction of justice in this city, and it's completely wrong. Do they have a point that an unelected person is in effect here sitting on the same stage with the mayor and the police commissioner seemingly deciding what police protocols ought to be?
Listen, I've had this conversation with numerous people, and I keep telling them, there is a way, if you want to get rid of Sharpton, we can do this overnight. Let's get rid of the conditions which bring about the calls to him. The Reverend doesn't go looking for these problems, mind you. The Reverend doesn't go, he's not scanning a police scanner trying to find problems. People are calling him because they don't see justice any other way. Let us make sure that the court system functions. Let us make sure that the criminal justice system is fair for all. And I assure you, people will go that way. But as long as there is a perception, and I would argue a reality on the ground, that justice is not evenly applied, There will always be a need for a Reverend Sharpton or someone of this nature. If you want to deal with the problem, deal with the cause of the problem, Reverend Sharpton is a symptom of a sickness. He is a sign saying that there is a fever and that we need to relieve it. Don't get mad at the messenger, get the message.
All right. Well, we will see how this plays out, but I certainly appreciate your time, Senator. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome, sir.